Hi, y'all. Welcome back to Discus Talk. Today we've got Dr. Samuel Pountney with us. Samuel is doing some background or some research. I'm going to let him tell you a little bit about it. Samuel, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Certainly. So, as rightly been introduced, I'm a fish researcher specializing in reproductive physiology. So mostly broodstock management of new species, newly domesticated species, and I worked most recently on domesticating the lumpfish, the North Atlantic lumpfish, for the salmon industry. They use them as cleaner fish to remove the sea lice parasites.
Right.
So that's on my most recent domestication. But to give you a little bit of a background, I did my undergraduate degree in marine biology at the University of Plymouth, and followed that up with a master's degree in aquaculture systems. Again at Plymouth, under a very well-renowned fish nutritionist, gentleman called Simon Davies. He's a very, very well-renowned fish nutritionist, specializing in sort of color additives, feed additives, and he's written a lot of books on on that sort of subject over his, I think he likes to say, 30 or 40 years now.
Awesome.
I worked for the British Antarctic Survey for a little while before doing my PhD, and now I find myself hoping. I've been looking to try and do this ornamental research for a while, and I find myself with an opportunity to do it, and so I'm working on that today. So I'm here to answer questions and hopefully get the word out a little bit more and talk to you guys about this, and then a few questions in my experience.
Okay. Well, we're all hobbyists, so I guess one thing we all want to know is, do you have your own fish?
Of course. I'm a hobbyist through and through. To start with, I've been keeping fish for I'm relatively young, so I'm going to say I've been keeping fish for about 20 years now. I got my first tank. My dad comes home one evening and goes, "Sam, I've got a friend who's giving away a 200-liter tank. All he wants is a £5 donation to a charity, and it's yours. It comes with everything. It's got a heater, it's got a filter, it's got lights. If you want it, I'll tell him, and you'll get it tomorrow." And I was so excited. I must have been 9 or 10 at the time, I think. And
sounds like my story.
Yeah. So I kind of eagerly went down the fish shop to try and find what I did. And, you were young back then. So dad helps you out with all the learning and trying to figure out what can actually go in it. So, and then it kind of spiraled. I took over their garage for a little while before heading to university. And then because I moved around quite a bit, I haven't had as many as a lot of people. You don't have the wall of tanks, unfortunately. I think the most I've had in a house at any one time is about 10 tanks in total, which is still quite a lot, really, when you think about it. But no, at the moment, I recently moved to North America, so the fish that I couldn't justify to myself taking, so the short-lived or very delicate species, I sort of said, well, no, I can't justify taking them. So I rehomed my old Betta and a few of my pea puffers and that sort of stuff, but I couldn't leave my German Discus behind, so I had to ship them across. I was telling Tammy yesterday while we were chatting, I couldn't leave them behind. So at the moment, I'm limited because I'm in a rented accommodation. I'm limited to two 150s. So I've got my Discus in one, and I've got my I've got a mixed reef in the other with some clownfish and stuff at the moment. So unfortunately, that's all I've got for the moment. But I will be getting more in when the landlord allows.
Awesome.
But what type of German Discus do you have? Like a cobalt or turquoise or?
I'm trying to think. I've got one. Well, I call them tomato, but I'm not entirely sure I'm calling them the right thing. I've got one tomato, 2 pigeon bloods, and I want to say can't remember what the other ones are now. Not off the top of my head, no. But they all survived the journey. They did great. I had a heart attack when my father-in-law picked them up at the airport, at Toronto Airport, and he said to me, Samuel, they threw them at me. I was like, they did what? I was like, yeah. So I had this big, it's a 100-liter cool box that you sort of, you put on a back of boat and throw a few beers in when you go fishing.
Right.
And I'd put it in that, and I'd labeled all along it, live fish in big bold letters, don't, handle with care, don't move. And he said the guy just sort of slid it across the floor to him. He goes, here you go, have that.
Oh my God.
And I just went, oh no. But they all made it. They all went in the right tanks, and they're all doing great. So
Awesome. Great story.
And they've been breeding successfully now for on and off for a month. So I'm every month or so. So I'm they clearly didn't affect them that much.
I agree. Excellent.
Oh, let's see. What are you currently working on, Mr. Pountney?
So I suppose we're gonna jump into the current project, and the reason why I'm on to today is I'm trying to investigate the scale of fish production by hobbyists such as yourselves, people who aren't associated with aquaculture farms, who are just doing it either for fun or to make a little bit money on the side, or just to see if they can breed something, to see actual what is the scale of this production that is going on. And the main reason this has sort of come about is I obviously have a big interest in ornamentals, and there's no information in the academic publications on ornamental fish. Most have, this is a new species, this is where it lives, this is what we've got, and they'll leave it at that. This is the sort of natural history side of things.
Right. Most of the information on the Discus is word of mouth from the original pioneers. And
to be honest with you, I would wager that the both of you probably have enough information to fill 3 or 4, maybe even 5 scientific papers on Discus alone. But it's things that you guys know from the experience that you have, from all this sort of stuff. But it's not known in academia. There's I think it's Andrew Rhyme, I think his name is. I keep saying Andrew. He's done a lot of work on marine ornamentals, and he repeatedly references in his work, he says, we are so behind on ornamentals. We don't know anything compared to the guys in the hobby giving talks and making presentations and doing all their own work in their garages. We know nothing. It's amazing to see actually how far behind we are in any of this information. There is some in Discus. There's a lot on koi carp and goldfish and these higher value ornamental species, but really not that much. So I want to open this up, but in order to actually start asking the questions that you guys want to know, the really specific information about Discus. And I know we've, Tammy, you sent me a few questions that we can get into later on.
Right.
But before we find out any of this information, we need to know, is it, how many people are doing this? Where is the, actually see, because if I do this survey, or have done this survey, and I find out, 1% of 1,000 hobbyists are doing breeding and doing, then it's not really a problem that we think it is, or it's not an issue that we think it is. But I did a preliminary survey to sort of test my questions, as so is common practice when you're doing research. And I think it was 95% of the people that I tested my survey on said that they were breeding fish. And the results coming back at the moment aren't really changing. And if we're taking that as a given for 95% of people that are keeping fish are at one point in time breeding, we're talking huge numbers.
That average sounds about right to me, because I think everybody that gets into the hobby and stays in the hobby, at some point they decide, hey, I'm going to breed these fish.
Yeah.
And I think everybody does at some point.
Mm-hmm. And we a lot of the sort of publications that are saying we really need to look at this because there's issues with invasive species. Certainly the creation of the flower horn, for example. Yes. It's causing havoc in Africa, and they're saying we need to actually figure out what's going on here. You get goldfish introductions in the Great Lakes. You get red-tailed catfish being put into rivers in Europe or wherever it might be, and they cause havoc. And then you've got the welfare issues, you've got the disease issues, you've got genetic bottleneck issues. But without any of this basic information that I'm trying to do at the moment, you can't say anything. We don't know. We can't start to work towards looking at these things.
Right. Like Sam, there's a lot of with all those invasive species and new introductions and introduced species, there a lot has to do with like disease as well, species jumping. So yeah, very bad, very bad.
And you look at all the publications, even from there's ones looking at the sustainability of wild capture fisheries in, say, the Amazon or whatever it might be. Right. And they're saying, well, we need to know what the hobbyists are doing, and the guys in the marine side are saying, we need to know what the hobbyists are doing, and it's nobody's looking at it because a lot of the money that funds scientific research, it's low on the priority list. When you apply to a funding body, for example, say you would, like in the UK, they have NERC, which is the National Environment Research Council, and they set out a target list of all the things that they like to achieve, and normally it goes, climate change, health, whatever, and there's, don't get me wrong, we're not exactly high on the list if we're comparing this to human cancers or diabetes or anything like that. But so the chances of getting funding is very low. And I know a few people who do get funding from elsewhere. They get funding from Mars Pet Company, for example, or fish feed companies or all these other things. And they come up against a different hurdle is they're testing foods, they're testing other things, but then they don't share the information. It's kept as a, in an industry, not secret, I suppose. They're entitled to keep the information on their research. Of course they are.
We'll tell you what we want to do.
but you guys don't get any of it. And at the same time, there is stuff being done, but you guys have an issue trying to get it. And we need to really connect more to try and work it through. And I go back to
what I spoke about last night with not being able to get hands on the research paper.
Yes. Yeah. And I go to back to Andrew Ryan, who's done a lot of the best work on ornamentals. He does it mostly marine, but he put out a paper in, I think, 2017, sort of saying, well, this is what we can do if we work with the hobbyists. And he was talking about how he'd worked with specific groups of people to domesticate and breed in captivity the mandarin. And which is quite, I get the impression it's quite a common, in fact, I had two in my tank down here. So it's quite a common marine ornamental that they still take from the wild. So, but he managed to do it in quite a short time frame, considering, because he worked with the hobby. And we really need to get on with that, to start doing this, to really improve for us and for you, for the hobby and for academia, improve our understanding, improve the hobby, and hopefully bring everyone up together.
Well, what do you need from the hobbyists in order to do this?
So, I mean, yeah. So in the first instance, it's participation. And I've had the survey up now for, I think, 3 weeks. And I will say this, the responses I've gotten so far have been great. I've had lots of people engaging. I've had lots of people interacting with the post, asking questions. It's been great. Keep that up, keep it visibility. And at the end of the day, the more people who respond to this survey, the better chance I have of turning around to wherever it is and saying, this is representative of the hobby.
Right.
And at the moment, I think I can have a look right now, actually. I think we're on about 300 responses. Yeah, just awesome. About 297. And really, the more the better. But I think for me to be able to get this work into the world and realistically look at it, I need over 1,000.
Okay.
And that's not a lot. It's not a lot. So interactions with this survey and answering all the questions that you can, you don't have to be a breeder. You can have just kept fish, and all I need is this is where I saw the link. I don't breed fish, and I can leave it at that. You don't have to answer any of the questions if you don't want to, except the one where I need to calculate the response rate, because that's what's needed to be reported to work out the statistic, how valid it is.
Okay.
But any interaction, share it with people if there are other people on Facebook.
Let's do that, Sammy. Tammy, share it with me. I don't know where it is again, but I know I answered it. I want to definitely help out, share it a little more, be a little more involved with that.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, at the time he wasn't in Simply, so I did post it on Simply in the Facebook group. So it's over there, but I will share it to you in Messenger as well, so that you can just share it out.
Right, I'll put it on my page too.
And that way
I appreciate it.
He doesn't have to join every group. I mean, you and I are hundreds of groups, so.
I am trying to tread a very careful line. I've posted on the forums where I can, and I've sort of gone to the moderators and I've said, look, this is what I'm trying to do. I appreciate that a lot of forums are closed communities. They don't want those external links. They don't want people being pestered. I'm gonna try and, because I'm a member of this community too. I don't want to ruin people's, I don't want to sit there and pester people. I want to try and keep it as nice as we can, and hopefully work with rather than aggravate people. So I don't want to spam. I don't want to, I'm trying to juggle the difference between I need enough to not waste the current people's effort to make it statistically valid so we can work with it, but at the same time I don't want to spam people. I don't want to make these places where people talk about fish hostile or
no, Carrie,
I can't think of the word.
Yeah, I take care of all that. Don't worry.
Yeah. But yeah, certainly interaction with the survey. I'm hoping to leave this one up for about 6 months, or when we get a sufficient number of responses that it's statistically valid. And then at that point, I can sit back and see what the next steps are. I mean, certainly I'd like to do some species specific work and try and figure out the areas that we need to work on for, discus, goldfish, guppies, and certainly some are farther ahead than others.
My understanding, the nutritional needs of fish has not been studied. I understand from another researcher that there's only 3 fish in the world that they have the actual nutritional needs for them. I think that is more important probably than any other aspect. Yeah,
it's certainly from, again, I'm a reproductive physiologist, so I base a lot of my nutritional things on egg quality. So that's essentially the hatching rate of the eggs that are laid. And you're right, realistically, we've got a good handle on Atlantic salmon, tilapia, and then a handful of other species. And one of the papers that I'm currently sending back and forth between myself and a coworker is, we took eggs and we've taken diet formulations from for the lumpfish that I'm working on. Mm-hmm. And we said, right, okay, well, what's the composition of the diet? What's the composition of the eggs after we've been feeding those diets? And then how does that correlate to hatching success or even fertilization success?
Perfect.
And, this work, they're still working on this for Atlantic salmon, and they've been doing that for over 50 years now. This is not something that takes a while, because a lot of the time when you have to control for these things, you take one specific mineral, one specific fatty acid, and you keep everything the same. That's unfortunately the way, so you don't have error. You need to keep as much things constant as possible. And you're right, nutrition for fish is lacking. And the range of fish that we have so many different specific diets that you can't, whilst they're probably getting good nutrition if you're feeding a varied diet. I know a lot of people in the hobby, I can't speak for yourselves, but they feed bloodworms, they feed brine shrimp, they feed some pelleted food from wherever, they feed another pelleted food as well another time, and they try and give then they give out beef heart as well. It's common, of course, for the discus, to try and give them that variation in, or make sure that they get it. But we don't know. Like, do you know if that's suitable for the fish we're giving? They seem to do okay, but we don't actually know whether or not it's good for them.
Right. And I'm a very much one that promotes a varied diet. I believe they need a varied diet in order to make sure that they are getting the nutritional needs that they have, that they're being met. So that's been a big one for me. I think if you're not giving them the proper diet, they're not going to be healthy. You're always going to have issues. So, I mean, a varied diet just kind of helps ensure that you're giving them what they need.
Yeah, because we don't have anything else to go off.
To go by,
yeah.
I'm a big fan, and I do use a flake. I know a lot of people don't use a lot of flakes for discus, but I do love a good seafood flake. And I'm a big worm fan. I like black worms. I like bloodworms. I don't use beef heart too much, but I'm a big believer in insects, protein, lots of seafood diets, things like that. So
yeah, it's one of the common issues that you tend to find with it's less so in freshwater fish, but still can be an issue, is the terrestrial derived sort of fatty acids. So the things that you'd find in your seed oils or your like butters and that sort of stuff. So the N6 is the N6 fatty acids. Whereas I don't know how much information a lot of the sort of audience has, but the marine oils tend to be higher in N3 fatty acids, and that just the ratio of those two really can sort of make or break the health and again, coming back to me, is egg quality of the fish. So the overall health of the fish, as well as the egg quality, and then juvenile survival after that, is really affected by this N3 N6 ratio,
and probably the longevity of the fish itself, the lifespan.
Probably.
Yeah, certainly. Feeding the wrong thing, you can get fatty buildup around organs. You can have problems with certain minerals being deficient from the diet. There's a million different ways that you could be underfeeding or overfeeding your fish without knowing it, because we don't have the or we have very little information on it.
This is awesome, very awesome.
How long will your research take, do you think?
Funny enough, I had that question this morning from someone
It's up to us, Tammy. It's up to us.
That's true, but I mean, once he's got the information, I mean, are we looking? How long are we looking at before you'll have?
It depends on the analysis, really, and how much I'm able to say with the answers that I get. If we take the longest period of time that the survey is going to come out, so that is going to be out, is sort of 6 months. After that, really, it's how hard I can work to get the data together. This is from the data analysis stage.
We won't hold you to it, Sam.
No, I am. It's hard. It depends. Without seeing the data, you can sort of get a thing. And I'm a prolific underestimator of how much work needs to get done. We're looking at maybe another 6 months after that.
Right.
It depends on what it is, and then unfortunately you have the process of publication and peer review that takes its time as well. But at the end of the day, once the analysis is done, I can talk to you guys. I want to share this as much as possible with as many people as possible, as quickly as possible. And whilst there is a limitation on the physical printed side of things, if you want to publish in an academic journal, it can't be published elsewhere first. It's their rules, it's their regulations. So I can't physically write up a report and put it onto the Simply Discus forum, for example, or wherever it might be.
Gotcha.
But I can come back on here and I can talk to you guys about what I found. Or I can go and give a talk at a fish club or a local aquarium or wherever it may be.
Yes.
I just can't publish it until it's gone through the academic side of things as well. But as soon as I've got the data back, I can tell you guys what we found, what it means, and hopefully, where the next steps we can really sort of target would be.
Okay. Well, that sounds great. Where will we be able to find it published once it's published?
So the journal hasn't been sort of targeted yet, but I'm hoping, well, depending on the results that we get, it would be nice to get it in a high ranking aquaculture journal, or it's probably going to be an aquaculture journal, like saying aquaculture, a journal like aquaculture, or the Journal of Fish Biology, for example, or the Journal of the World Aquaculture Association. They've got a habit of receiving works like this, and hopefully I need to get it open source as well, so we don't want it behind that paywall.
Right.
So you can go on, anyone can go on and access it whenever they can, and again, once it's done and once it's been accepted, it's just I can disseminate wherever it needs to be. I can give talks, I can give presentations, I can post the findings on Simply Discus or wherever else it might be, and really get the information out, because it's the information that you guys need as well as us, and having that open dialogue is important.
Yeah.
All right.
So great, man. That's I don't even know what to say. That's take your time out and to do something like that and go through that's awesome. I appreciate it.
Do you think there'll ever be a place that's not behind a paywall that we can access some of the research papers? Because we really don't have a lot of resources in the hobby of how to diagnose, how to figure out what's going on with the fish and that sort of thing.
Yeah, so the official line that I've got to stick to is, if you want a paper, you either have to pay for it, or you have to, email the author. So, for example, if you wanted one of mine, you'd email me, and I would let it sit in my email inbox for 6 weeks before having a look at it and deleting it. In all seriousness aside, the paywall frustrates a lot of academics as well as normal people, and I'm a believer in free access to information as much as possible, because it's frustrated me for my entire life as well. And to be honest with you, they're happy just to share their work.
Yes.
If you want to talk, if you want to find out information on them, that, like, I will answer within a day if anyone wants my paper, because I just want to share it. I want people to actually see and read what it is. It doesn't matter if you're if you're just reading it for fun, if you're an undergrad student who just happens to want to read about it, or if it's just someone who has never read a paper before and just wants to try. Like, I'd rather just have it shared. So the official line is email the author.
Well, hey, Sam, you're just like us. I see why Tammy hijacked you.
Access to if you need from that point in time.
Honestly, they need to make the papers open access.
They should be put in open access after a point of time, but often they don't.
Hobbyists do not have access to veterinarians everywhere. We do not have access to somebody who knows what they're doing. We have to learn this ourselves. We need access to these papers. It's that simple.
The more diplomatic way, I would say, is something called Researchgate. It's more like I suppose a Facebook for academics is probably the best way to describe it. You sign up with an email address. You don't have to be affiliated with a university. And a lot of academics, once the period of time lapses for the copyright on the papers from the journal, they just put them on that for free. So you can access it that way as well if you have trouble and are uncomfortable going to Sci-Hub.
Wow, this is
so
all
there are
great,
ways
great
of doing
information. Great
Mhm.
information.
And I really, you need to,
Okay.
more people need to see these papers and this information.
You're in a great position for me to answer this question. And I know I sent it to you last night, so I know you're prepared. And I already know the answer, but I want to get your perspective on this, and your great perspective, actually. Why is it that there are so few veterinarians willing to treat fish?
Well, I think first of all, I think willing is probably the wrong word. Able is probably the best word.
Okay.
My wife is a veterinarian, and
Yes.
I showed her this question last night when we were driving back in the car, and she spent the entirety of the hour that we were driving back ranting about how she would have loved to have done more fish stuff if she could possibly have done so. And she went to one of the best veterinary schools in the world.
Right.
And the simple answer is, in that vet school, they had 2 1-hour lectures on fish. It was, this is a fish, this is what they look like, this is a salmon, this is a tilapia. Some people like to remove tumors from koi, but often they do it themselves, and that's about it. And the lecture was given by a person from my old institution, not a veterinarian. He was he was just a fish physiologist, and there is often a lack of engagement between sort of aquatics and veterinary care, in that, unfortunately, when you and I have a problem with our fish in a tank, whatever it might be, by the time you call up a vet to try and find what it is, or to get access to the medication or whatever it is, the fish is belly up.
Yeah.
And that becomes an issue, and how to tackle that is a problem. But the simple fact of the matter is even the fish vets that are working as fish vets for example, aquaculture, or the few ornamental vets that are around, they sit there and they say, we need more of it. We need people to come and do this. Right. But there's very limited access when you're doing your veterinary degree,
right?
To try and actually get the experience, because they're required to do certain number of hours of experience on, with cows, with sheep, with pigs, with chickens, with cats, dogs, mice, but they don't have that access to the fish side of things.
Right.
There was never ever even if it was an aquaculture body, an aquaculture company, whatever it may be, whatever their name may be, even they didn't go and say, we want to hire a student, we want to get a veterinary student involved. Right. It was quiet. There was never an opportunity, and she went looking to try and find ways of getting fish experience, and kept coming up against sort of roadblocks of, we don't take second or third years, we take 5th years only. By that point, you've done your entire veterinary degree, and it's sort of too late. Or I'll come back and go and do a master's after your veterinary, after your 5-year postgraduate veterinary degree. You've done 4 years undergraduate to then become a vet, which is 5 years, then go and do a 2 years master's course in aquatic medicine or whatever it may be. And it's sort of like, well, one, I'm broke, because I've spent 9 years in education, and 2, I kind of just want to get out of education now. So
Right.
it kind of filters out people, I think, and they don't focus on it at all. And I don't blame them. In a way, there's not that many. Well, there is. That's the problem. I was just about to say there's not that many fish, but there is. There's 14% of households in the UK have ornamental fish.
Oh yeah.
That's 2.68 million households have
Actually
fish.
have a research paper done on that, on how many ornamental fish,
Mhm.
how big this industry actually is.
Yeah.
Thinking, well, why don't we have the research being done on the ornamentals like it should be? The only time that any research is done in ornamental fish is if some of the big farms start having issues and they have to call in somebody,
Mhm.
actually do the research and find out what's going on. That's about the only time we get papers published.
And this sort of comes back to the lack of funding, the lack of actual access to funding for this type of work. I'm doing this work in what is essentially a break in my career. I finished my last contract with the university. I emigrated with my partner, and I'm in immigration limbo. I'm still waiting for the paperwork to come through because everything's slow during during modern times, unfortunately.
Right.
And I'm doing this. I've had this on the back burner to try and do for maybe 5 or 6 years, and I haven't been able to do it because things that get me money to do the work that I need to do
Right.
unfortunately have taken precedent over that. There's no one's been able to. You can't get the money, and
Right.
because there's no one willing to fund it until there's a problem, and then all of a sudden the money comes in,
Right.
and unfortunately it's hard to do science without money, and that's a shame, but it's the truth.
I think a lot of people in the hobby may not understand that the research that is done is funded by somebody.
Yeah.
And then when you get the research money, the universities get this research money, it's only to do that specific thing. It's not to do the nutrition of discus. When you've got a discus farm that's got sick fish, they're not doing the nutrition, only doing the sick fish.
Mm-hmm.
And I think people don't understand that funding is targeted to a specific thing, not to the hobby as a whole.
When you put in a proposal for these sort of things, you have to sit there and you go, this is what you create a budget, but these are budgets on $1 million scales, and you go, every penny is accounted for. This is what I'm doing it for. This is where this money is going to be spent. We need to run this trial. It's going to cost this much. Tank rentals this much. Getting the fish is this much. Histology is this much. Veterinary advice is this much, and so on and so forth. You have a long list of things. There's not much wiggle room in, well, okay, I'd also like to collect a sample on these discus nutrition, what they're eating and what their health status might be, or you don't have that room, and things in academia cost a lot. It's surprising how hard it is to do these things. We were talking about open source before. To get your paper out of that paywall, it's approximately $4,000 or $5,000.
Right.
To have your paper published, and some universities have a fund for that, but that's a limited fund.
Right.
So most people turn around and go, well, okay, well we're not going to pay the $4,000 or $5,000 to get our paper out of the paywall because it's not in our interest to do so.
Perfect sense.
Because they can't justify spending $4,000 or $5,000 out of their budget. That's for that $4,000 or $5,000 might go towards something that they can they use another trial, another month of doing something else that they need to do.
Right. And that makes perfect sense.
It's amazing. Wow.
But, it's an interesting thing, and it's hard to explain sometimes how these things work. A lot of things take time, and a lot of things take money, and it's unfortunate the way it has to work. And hopefully this is one of the big things of what I really want this work to do. It's sort of coming full circle again, is if I can turn around, and big headline is thousands of people are producing fish, and this is an issue, this is an issue, this is an issue, you know, and they are considerable issues. Money, you know, money for this sort of stuff. You know, I'm not saying for myself, but well, you know, I'm not going to complain if I get a few.
I mean, everything costs money.
It then provides that justification. Somebody else writing a report, somebody else writing a proposal to get funding will go, well, he's said this is a really big issue and this is something that needs looking at, and they will use this work to justify getting that money. You know, in fact, for this proposal to set up this work, I used Ryan's information. I said, well, he's already said this, and then I looked at I go back to the flower horn example, and I said, well, they've already identified that that's a really big issue, and we need to, you know, build this story and then say, well, this is where we need to identify, this is what we need to do next. So essentially my work will then go, okay, we'll build the story. I've identified that there's a lack of access of, I mean, it's obvious to you and me, but to the academic record, they don't know there's a lack of access to veterinary care. You know, it's not known on that, you know, or the, you know, there's not a considerable amount of deformities that have come through, or egg quality is really poor maybe, or you have a significant issue with other things. It's not known. And until it's known that that's an issue, no one's going to give anyone the money to do it.
See, I called every veterinarian within a 2-hour drive, and that includes Birmingham, Alabama, Huntsville, Alabama, and some of the bigger cities in the area, and not one that did any type of fish care. There was one that when I called them, they said, oh, we used to do that, but we don't do that anymore. You know, and I really wanted to ask them why, but I was very frustrated. So my closest veterinarian is approximately 3 hours away.
It's probably the lot of experience. The lack of experience is, you know, there maybe was an aquatic vet there that moved on, unfortunately. You know, they're in short supply, veterinarians. You know, certainly taking my partner, for example, they work ridiculously long hour days for pittance, compared for the work that they do, at least. And I think it's just, unfortunately, it's a shame, but they don't necessarily have the time to deal with that as well.
Yeah, see, I got an estimate on how much money it costs in the US to become a veterinarian. And I can tell you that most veterinarians were probably paying on student debt until retired.
I can probably guarantee that that's the case.
I saw that number. As a matter of fact, I've looked into buying some of the veterinarian books. I ran across some syllabuses for some classes at Florida, and I tried to buy the veterinarian books, and I looked at that and went, I am never paying that much for a book. That was outrageous. I think one of them was like $700 and the other one was like $900. And I'm like,
oh my,
pay that much for a book. I can't imagine them having to pay that much for a book that they have to have.
Yeah.
Did they come with book covers?
Hope so.
Hopefully they were gold plated books at that rate. But no,
I was flabbergasted. And I think a lot of the reason that people are not doing a lot of the veterinarians that have the classes available, the University of Florida, Auburn University, the University of Georgia, I believe, has a veterinarian program, also offers the aquatic. I think the reason that the veterinarians aren't doing it is simply because of how much it's going to cost.
I think I know. I can't speak for the Atlantic side of degrees, but even in the UK, when education is heavily subsidized, and you get government backed loans instead of sort of I think you have Sally Mae, I think, don't you? They tripled tuition fees the year after I did my undergraduate, and they do give people sort of loans to live on as well if they need, but the average student really, and I know there's the stereotypical idea of a partying student, of course, but at the same time a lot of them just struggle to make ends meet, and they're not worried about, well, they are worried about just trying to get through the course, let alone do anything else. Especially the ones on the long courses. I know doctors who wouldn't eat 2 days out of the week just because they couldn't afford the food. Yeah, it's and I got the guys that I bunked with at university. They two medical doctors who knew the risks of those sort of things, didn't, because they just couldn't afford it.
Right.
It's a shame. And you're right, the cost is outrageous.
It's
Absolutely
staggering.
outrageous.
I mean, it was just, and I do have a few veterinarian books, and I do study them. Because there's so much I need to know, especially with some issues that I have going on here in my own fish room. Issues that I've seen that don't have an explanation that other people are having issues with. So I do a lot of the research, a lot of the anatomy, a lot of the physiology I'm learning about, which there's really not a lot of that either. I don't think that they fully understand exactly how everything functions. So that's very difficult. I've taken human anatomy and physiology, and I caught that really quick. And I'm sitting here looking at the fish physiology, and it's different, but it's incomplete. So they really, there's so much missing in some of the research that still needs to be done.
Oh, without a shadow of a doubt. And the issue is, we say fish like we would say cat or dog.
Right.
But the diversity of form, I suppose, is the best way to describe it, of fish is ridiculous. You have, stingrays, sharks, and eels on one end, and your bony fish on the other, and that spans a ridiculously wide amount of variation that you don't see. And I think I read somewhere, and don't quote me on this, but there's more diversity within the salmonids than there is in, like, cats, dogs.
I think
they all look very similar, but you've got such a diversity in these stocks than you would see in a lot of terrestrial animals. And that's talking about one fish.
Probably one of the best books that I have is Dr. Edward Noble. I absolutely love that one. He goes into a lot of detail about a lot of different things. And I'm trying to remember the author of the other one that I look at, because he goes more into the physiology that's known.
Yeah.
What gets me is we see so many swim bladder issues. And Carrie, I know you've seen hundreds of them, and you know that I'm having an issue with it now. They do not even know which organs are actually tied into the function of the swim bladder. You could have kidneys tied in with it. You could have your liver could be tied into it. And it can be any one of, 100 different sensors for that bladder that are malfunctioning that can cause it.
And then, of course, you have to ask the question, well, is it an air-filled swim bladder? Is it a lipid-filled swim bladder? Yeah. Do they have a kidney? Do they, are they,
Right.
all of a sudden you've gone down a rabbit hole of, well, okay, I need to figure out whether this fish has got this organ or it doesn't have this organ, or whether it's, and, I mean, yeah, you're right. The information is really not there. And the way
there's so much diversity in fish.
The way we tend to do it, so the way that we do it with new species is we sort of look at comparable species. And so we go, okay, right, what ecological range do these fish occupy that we're looking to study more of? And we go, okay, well, they may be North Atlantic cold water fishes. And okay, so we've got a comparable ones is maybe halibut, maybe our cod. And you can sort of say, okay, well, what do we know about these ones that are more studied? And we can go, okay, how can we apply that to others, to these species? And I often get in a little bit of a debate with a friend of mine on the mainland in BC, because he and may be in danger of causing a bit of controversy, so bear with me, is the whole idea of water hardness. And I know some fish require water hardness, and and there are different levels of water hardness that you get these fish from, ranging from the discus that tend to like softer water compared to the, say, like harder water guppies, I think, if I can remember rightly. I can't remember, but we look at from the studies that are known, from the fish that are comparable, there's no data to suggest there's an issue with water hardness. So you can go ahead and put a discus in liquid chalk and it'd be fine, according to the information that we currently have.
Really?
Again, because the comparable species that we have done this work on, they look at, okay, well, here's the range of water hardnesses. Are there any welfare issue indicators? Do we have increased skeletal deformities? Do we have, more, or brittle skeletons if we're going the other way, for example? Exactly. And the only real comparable species we have are sort of trout, tilapia, and a couple of other, which have maybe got one or two. Because
we consume them.
Yeah, so we've got a lot more information on them, and looking at the information from them, they can tolerate a high range of water hardness. And you go, well, okay, well, there's no evidence to suggest at this point that you need to worry about water hardness. Yeah.
Right.
But we know, from a lot of people's experience in the hobby, you stick a discus in liquid chalk and it's not exactly going to be doing very well. But of course, we haven't got to getting that information. But that's where we would look to find that information. So if I were to be sort of making it, if I were working this through like I would when domesticating a new species, I'd say, well, the information we have on the fish that we have suggests that we don't need to worry about that because that's what we've got currently.
Right.
So then it gets missed maybe, and it's hard, but it's you work with, unfortunately, with what you've got, and until you can look into it and actually work it out. And I think you and I, Tammy, had a discussion. You were talking about hatching success in different TDSs, was it? I think, if I remember.
No, it's my pH.
pH.
I have another question on that in a minute. No, my pH is 8.5. I cannot reduce my pH with RO. My water is extremely stable. But I can lower the TDSs. My TDSs, though, are only 212, and I've heard of discus being in 500 or 600, 700 TDS. So my water isn't as hard, but it does have that high pH. I mean, I would love to be able to participate in a study that's based just on discus. Discus is one of very few fish that actually feed their own young.
Yeah, I think it's 3, isn't it? The 3.
Yeah, I think it is.
Mucus.
Yeah, I think it is 3 that actually feed their young.
I know there's waru, but I can't think of the other one off the top of my head.
No, I can't either. You're trying to think of it, but yeah, discus is one of only 3 fish in the world that do that, that we know of. Yeah. I do believe there are other species of fish that we haven't found.
Oh, I'm sure there are. They're finding them every.
Right. So that's possible there's more, but I mean, it's really interesting. And I think that should be something that research should focus on, that people should be willing to say, hey, go research this. Go research this fish. It's different. It's cool.
And don't get me wrong, there is a lot more information on discus than there is on, I don't know, say your corridoras or your guppy. Well, actually, no, guppies are relatively
Guppies are actually fairly well researched.
I'm trying to think of just your bog standard, maybe a tiger barb or something like that. People have focused on discus because they're valuable. A lot of people do do pay a considerable amount of money. I don't know what your most valuable discus would be, but I certainly paid upwards almost $1,000 for a couple of mine over the years. That's for sure.
Okay, guys, it's been great seeing you guys today. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I would like to thank Dr. Pountney for joining me today.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
You're very welcome. You guys make sure to find that survey You'll find it in most of the discus groups. I think I saw it in some guppy groups and possibly some angelfish groups. So hunt that down, search up Samuel on Facebook in a group. If he's in that group, then it's probably there. And if you can't find it there, message me and I will shoot it to you. For the researchers who are looking to hook up with hobbyists who also do research, you can email me at discustalk@yahoo.com. If you want to reach Carrie personally, let me know that and I will shoot the email over to Carrie. And we'll see you guys next time. Bye, y'all.
Thank you very much.